Hello, everyone. Welcome to Picklist Formation and Alliance Selection. My name is Hanson, and this is Richard.
I'm Richard McCann. I'm a member with the team, and we wanted to share with you much of what we've learned of working with other teams. Being a team that's been in top alliances, we're in a position where we're actually able to converse with other teams a lot about how they do their alliance selections, and so we wanted to share that with you here today.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I guess we'll start off with a quote that basically encompasses this whole presentation. It says, your robot wins matches and your scouting wins competitions. So this is, I don't know where I heard this from, but I heard it somewhere, and it kind of stuck with me because that's really like what we do with our scouting system, and that's what we aim for. So yeah, just keep that in mind while you listen to this presentation. So who should be here? Basically, teams that are consistently alliance captains, teams that could potentially be alliance captains, and teams that are aiming to be on successful alliances, and teams that aspire to be alliance captains. So if you didn't notice, this is basically like everyone in this room. So yeah.
So I just want to add, we help a lot of teams that are alliance captains for the first time in competitions. We were at a competition in 2014 and watched a team try to pick off of the ranking list, which did not go well. And we vowed to never have another team do that in another competition. So we actually help other teams with their scouting and with their alliance selections to see they're going to be a captain.
Okay, so for those of you who might be consistently a high seed captain, or if you're not one, then this is kind of like what most of them are like thinking when they're at a competition. So when we say high seed captain, we're talking about like the top 1 to 4 seed usually at every competition. Basically, like they want to be looking for offensive power in their first pick almost every game. And in the first pick, having like technical capabilities, so like having like a lot of like knowledge in their students or like a lot of resources in their pit box or whatever to help with any problems, that's a big plus, especially when we pick our first picks. In your second pick, we always look for utility. So this is like just filling any holes in your alliance, being versatile, and like maybe like a jack of all trades is kind of a perfect fit for a second pick. And then obviously every competition, every high seed captain should be doing a lot of scouting. So we have another we had another workshop last night that was basically scouting system development. I don't know if you guys went to that one, but that goes into detail, like a lot of detail into how our scouting system works. So yeah, do you have any notes for this one?
So I just want to point out that this first aspect about technical capability is important. That actually in 2014 was one of the deciding factors at the World Championship for who we picked first in these competitions. And when you're looking for a second pick, you're looking for a hidden gem. We really have lucked out in getting offensive robots. 2015, getting 1671 was one of the biggest steals of a second pick that's ever happened at championships.
Okay, and then so a low seed captain is, when I say that, I mean like usually 5 through 8 seed or maybe a little bit below that. Basically for this one, you need to prepare for all scenarios because usually if you're in this position, the seeding is a little bit, it changes a lot on the second day of quals. And so you want to, like on draft night, you would want to prepare for all the scenarios that could happen. Like what if team 1 picks this team, and then what would the second team pick if they were to pick that one? I'll go over that more in detail later. So for your first pick, since usually if you're seated below, like if you're seated like 5th seed or below, you're probably not the top offensive robot in the competition. And so therefore you would want to find complementary strength in your first pick. So if you're an offensive bot, then you might be looking for a defense bot. A prime example of this was in like actually this year, Chesy Champs, just like a month ago. Basically, Jack in the Bot, 2910, they picked 6443, which was a defense bot. And Jack in the Bot was like one of the fastest cyclers. And they were 5th seed or 6th seed, something like that. So yeah, and they ended up advancing the semifinals, and it was a really strong alliance. And then as for your second pick, it kind of goes similar to if you're a top seeded captain. So this is like your second pick should be filling any holes in your alliances. And then while you're picking your second pick, you want to keep in mind which alliance captain you'll face. So based on what you seed, if you're the alliance captain, you'll know like if I'm in 7th seed, I'm facing number 2. If I'm in 6th seed, I'm facing number 3. Stuff like that. So, and also keep in mind that since you are lower seeded, you will have one of the first, like you'll go first in order for second picks. And so you'll have like your pick of like the strongest second picks, given that you have the scouting data. So as always, you should also be scouting if you're ranking this high.
So,
do you have anything for that?
Yeah, and just that, remember, even if you're in a low seed, that does not mean that you're going to lose your quarterfinal. There's at Chesney Champs this year that seeds 6, 7, and 8 all advanced to the semifinal. One of them actually making it to the final in that competition. And at Einstein in Detroit this year, not a single #1 seed made it to the finals, onto the final field in Einstein. They were all defeated by lower seeds. So keep that in mind when you're picking your alliances.
Okay, and then so if you're not in like the top 8 consistently every competition, if you are aspiring to be on a competitive alliance, you definitely just want to talk to the teams that are seated high. And so when I say talk to the teams, I don't mean like beg them to pick you, because that's definitely not what they want to hear. You want to find out their criteria, and so you literally ask them like, what are you looking for in a first pick? What are you looking for in a second pick? What can we do to show you that we would be competent as a first or second pick? So first, like I said earlier, first pick is usually offensive power, and second pick is usually depending on like what seed that alliance is in, or like what holes the alliance needs to fill. And then understand that just because you talk to, like, let's say the #2 or #3 seed, any team could pick you. So if you're picked before by a team that like maybe you didn't talk to, you'll have to like keep that in mind just in case that happens. And then just a general rule of thumb is if you're not an alliance captain, you do want to be cooperative in quals, and like you want to follow the match strategies that maybe another team employs. And then you also want to be reliable and consistent. So that means like not going incapacitated like every match, or like, like keeping your robot functioning. Yeah, that's definitely what we want to look for in like someone in a first pick and second pick. And so, and also if you can, you should scout, because you never know when you might need to use that scouting data.
And really remember that your team should really be cooperative with your qualifying round mates, and also it's important to be reliable late in the competition. Every time we go into not every time, frequently when we go into a meeting with one of the other top seed alliances, they will come with a list of 1 or 2 teams that they really don't want to have on their draft list, because simply for various reasons, being uncooperative or being unreliable. So keep that in mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to go into basically the picklist process. A lot of this presentation is just going to be the specific process that 1678 uses, but I'm sure it's pretty similar to a lot of the high-seeded teams' processes. So what we start with is basically we need a way to like visualize our scouting data. So on 1678, we use spreadsheets, Google Sheets specifically, and we take the data like from a cloud server or something, and then it gets into a CSV, and we import that CSV into our spreadsheet. And then before the competition, like I guess like once the season starts, we start working on like formatting the spreadsheet so that like we can just plug in data, and then it just pops up like this. So this is what our like first pick sheet looks like, and as you can see, we have like a lot of like data points. We have a team number going down, and then it's just like all the data is right there, and it's really easy to look at. So it needs to be set up beforehand. There's a lot of formulas and formatting that like plays in here. Like I guess some of the basic formatting we use in our spreadsheet is like conditional, number, freezing, alternating colors, and then we use filters at the top so we can sort with whatever data point we want. And then, like I said earlier, our scouting systems workshop goes more in depth into this, and so definitely check that out. It should be on YouTube like soon if they recorded it.
Yeah, it'll be up on the website for for the fall workshops shortly.
Okay, so as for the actual picklist meeting, you should figure out the logistics beforehand. Figure out who you want to participate, because if you have too many people, it might be a little bit unproductive. As if if you had just a little bit less people. You also want to like identify, like, I don't know if you want scouts or like the scout lead, or the driver and operator at your Picklist meeting. You want to figure out logistics, so that includes like visual aids, which is like the spreadsheet that we showed above, like bring a projector, a laptop that has a long battery life or something. And then also figure out dinner, because we can't think when we're hungry. So when you go into your Picklist meeting, you definitely want to keep in mind the context that you're in on the first night, on the day after the first, on the night after the first day of calls. So like this includes your seating, and then what you predict will be, like what position each team will be in. Yeah, and so if you have the data to make a pick list and the resources or manpower, then you should definitely make one, because in case you get first picked by an alliance captain, or if you're having a pick list meeting, then your scouting data is going to come in handy. So
yeah, I really want to emphasize this point about having dinner separately for your strategy team. We used to have our strategy team go and have dinner with the team and then go off to its meeting by itself. And we found it actually added, by having us move our dinner separately, we actually saved an hour off of our strategy meeting by doing that. So I really strongly emphasize that. Also, it's also important to gain things out through a lot of this. For example, in 2013, we actually went through a bunch of scenarios of how the drafts could go, and set up our draft to account for those different scenarios.
Mm-hmm. And that's all stuff that you should figure out like during the beginning of your meeting, so you can I guess play around it is the best way to describe that. And so you start out by identifying your goals. So this is like what's your criteria if you are an alliance captain, or if you're a potential first pick, then what's your criteria for who you will pick later. So figure out what your valued attributes are and what data points are most important. Figure out what's difference between your first and your second pick. Figure out what your DMP criteria is and who might already be on a DMP list after the first day.
DMP is?
Do not pick. DMP is do not pick. And then figure out what your role in that alliance will be. And so you can build your alliance around that. As for list length, we always go 24 for regionals, because there's 24 teams that go into eliminations, and then 32 for champs, because each alliance has 4 instead of 3. And so even if there's if there's robots that you would place above yourself in terms of pick order, then you do so anyway, because then you can just cross them out. And keep in mind, be aware of how long your meeting is going, because I remember there was 2018 champs, the meeting lasted until 2 a.m. or something, and then we had to get up at 5 a.m. the next day. Yeah, so just try not to go too long into the night, so you can actually be well rested, relatively, I guess. And then at the beginning, like we said before, predict the alliances if you're seated high, so you can tailor your pick list to that.
And so you also want to make sure that that you want to restructure. Well, what we do first, actually, I should back up. We actually set out our criteria starting the day of kickoff, because we're doing our strategy design, and we use that strategy design to set out our criteria for our pick list. We're thinking about what the rest of our alliance is going to do when we do our strategy and design for our robot. And then when we get to the competition season, we revisit that criteria. So, for example, in 2018, we actually realized that we wanted to focus on teams that were putting a lot of cubes into the scale really early in the match, because many of those teams were putting cubes and then quit putting cubes in. And so we had a cutoff. How many cubes could they put in before 100 seconds was left in the match? So that was something that we came up with actually after the first couple weeks of competition. So keep that in mind when you're designing your draft criteria.
And so these pictures here is taken straight from our pick list spreadsheet, and this is basically the second pick data points that we used for this year, actually. And so, yeah, that's kind of the order that we had them in. It's not in order of priority, but it's just a list of important data points that we considered. So creating your initial pick list. So basically to like actually form the pick list, what we do is if we know that if like the first pick is obvious, if you're like a top seed alliance captain, your first pick is obvious, then it's definitely a good choice to meet with your alliance partner or like communicate with them in some way, like over video chat or audio. And then together, you would grind through all of your scouting data. So this includes like match videos, graphs and trends, numbers of like scored game pieces, anecdotes and observations that anyone might have made during the day. And so basically the 3Ds that, well, I like to call them the 3Ds, is discuss, debate, decide. So you discuss, basically you go down the list and you say, oh, like, is this robot better than this robot? And if so, you move them above. And then you go again, is this robot better than this robot? And you keep moving them above until they're at the right place. And so you go down the list and you keep doing that. And obviously there's going to be differing opinions between people on during this discussion. So you have to discuss with people, you debate with people the pros and cons of like, why, like what does this robot bring to our alliance and why is that better than this robot? Definitely play devil's advocate, like instead of just like kind of being a bystander and just like agreeing with everything that other people are saying, like try and figure out like flaws in the logic or like kind of like find the benefits of like the opposite side that people are arguing. And then at the end, you come to a group consensus. So this is like decide, are we moving them up? Like, do they deserve to be below this team or this team? And throughout this whole discussion, you should be maintaining productivity because that's the most important thing throughout a Picklist meeting, and that's what's going to make you get more sleep and like end as quick as possible. So, and then this is a picture of one of the graphs that we formulated in the spreadsheet, and we take the scouting data. This basically shows the hatch panels scored of our Einstein Alliance for all 10 matches that they played in our division at Champs this year. So.
Yeah, and this is the pairwise comparison is actually an example of something that we learned from other teams. I'm talking about so we picked this up from 118 and 254, who were doing this kind of comparison. And in fact, that's why 1671 in 2015 ended up so high on our list, because we end up just moving them up our initial ranking list until they got really high into our list. So that was that's an example of learning from other teams about how to do your drafts.
And I forgot to mention at the beginning, we have a metric called first pick ability and second pick ability. And so that's like a pre-arrangement of like all the teams in our at the competition. And then that list is often not accurate, and we would never just take that list as a pick list. So like sometimes we find teams at the bottom that we move like 20 positions up because like for some reason the scouting system didn't catch their value to an alliance. So yeah. So at the end of the meeting, like that's your first draft of your pick list. This picture is, well, so this list right here is our first draft at the end of our pick list meeting at Champs this year. And then you run through the list, just make any like last minute changes. And then you should expect to shift almost every team around the next day, because even if just like one position, even if just a little, you'll probably shift them around based on how they perform on the second day of quals and based on how like the seeding changes on the second day of quals. And so you also want to prepare questions, observations for the second day of quals. So like if you, let's say this year there was a team you were looking at and you were wondering like, oh, this team never like started off HAB level 2 on their first day. Like, can they start off HAB level 2? And if they can, then we should move them up. So at that point, you'd want to ask them the second day and say, can you like start level 2 in this match and like prove to us, because we're considering you in our pick list. And so as you can see, a lot of these like arrows that I drew, and like I basically had to rewrite it like twice because I drew so many arrows. And then so this, well, actually the final list is on another page, but this is like almost at the finalization of our pick list for Champs. And so all of this happened on the second day of quals at Champs. Okay, so like I said before, there's a lot of redundancy in this slide, but the second day of quals, you ask the questions that you prepared the night before. You ask teams to demonstrate any abilities that you want to see before picking them. And you rearrange your pick list according to all these observations. And if you're still scouting on the second day, then use that as well. And then the pick list, we don't finalize our pick list until essentially like the last qualification match, or maybe the last 2 or 3. Because the rankings could change, and then or teams could like show us some outstanding ability that would move them up.
When you say rearrange the pick list, is that the same real time? Are they sitting together somewhere, or is it like?
Yeah. So on our team, basically at competitions, we have like after the end of the pick list meeting, we have the list written down on like a notebook or something, and then we're sitting together in the stands on the second day, and we're like agreeing on which team should be moved up or down.
It's a
Yeah.
subset because, for example, our drive coach and our pit strategists are on that pick list. They're not up in the stands the second day. They don't see the matches much the second day, so they have very little input into that rearranging of the pick.
You got a committee, a super committee, and like a subcommittee.
Committee, right?
Yeah,
right. So it's a subcommittee, probably of 3 or 4. Usually me and 3 or 4 other students, and maybe one other mentor with some input into that pick list strategy. And this is actually, I was going to point out, in Utah in 2018, the second pick list, 399, had an awful first day. But our scouting data picked up that they were, over the last 5 matches of the competition, the best team on the field. And so we moved them to the top of our list because we were watching them on the second pick, on the second day competition. So paying attention that second day is actually very useful that way.
Okay, so on to alliance selection. So after you've made your final pick list, like right after the last qualification match, what we do is for the person that's going up to represent our team or your team, they should be prepared. So that means like writing the pick list down on paper is what we do. Stay in communication, which means like Slack, text, like calling or something, just in case anything goes wrong. So we write our pick list on paper so that as teams are picked and become unavailable, you cross them out. So you're not that guy that says that like picks a team that's already been picked before, and then you kind of have to like stand there awkwardly as you like scramble for another pick. If something unexpected occurs, you definitely want to call whoever is up like representing your team so you can confirm with them like what to do, just in case like your pick list doesn't, like, just in case anything changes with your pick list or something like that. If you are the representative up there, you want to speak with confidence. And a lot of, like, one of my pet peeves is when people, like, they say some, like, weird stuff to, like, when they're being selected or when they're selecting other people. Basically, I guess the rule of thumb, I don't know who needs to know this, but if you are being picked for another alliance, and if you're being picked for another alliance, you would say like, we graciously or gratefully accept. And then if you're declining, then you want to say respectfully declines. And then if you are a first pick and you're picked by an alliance captain, you want to confer with them immediately as you, like whoever the representatives, they want to confer with the alliance captain as soon as possible so you can figure out the second pick and agree on something if you haven't talked to them before. So, yeah.
So there was a couple of examples. One is an example of a team that went up with multiple lists and it messed them up, which was Curie in 2013. 1717 went up and on their second pick actually picked off their do not pick list for their second pick, which was like just a major mistake. But the other thing is also communicating, being ready to communicate with people in the stand. So on Carver this year, well, we had kind of a dual purpose list that we went up with, and we realized that there were actually teams that were still on our first pick list that were still available. And our captain called up and said, what should I do? And we told her, just keep going down our first pick list. So we ended up with 2 first pick robots that we were not expecting to have available. That was a strategy decision we made on the fly. And I just want to say one other thing. You guys are in position 7419 to be an alliance captain tomorrow. So I hope that you guys are prepared with your draft.
Captains at SCR.
Okay, so so you're all set. Sort of.
So this visualization thing really matters. We actually have a very big program in the rookies, and we have tons of Excel data. And we literally had a mom who's like a manager at SVR trying to do the visualization graphs at like 11:30 at night and having it all pre-populated. She looked at me and was like, "Why didn't you tell me that I do this?" I was like, "Oh, we can visualize it in 10 minutes."
Yeah, you definitely want to figure that out before you go to a competition. Yeah. So for the strategic decisions that might be made during alliance selection, these basically include like declining, and then if you're an alliance captain, you might consider scorching the field if the circumstances are right. So declining is usually done if you're in the top 8 teams, then you can safely decline without being like eliminated from eliminations, if you will. If you're at the 9 through 12 seed, then it might be a little risky because then you would have to depend on all of the alliance captains picking each other for you to be in a picking position. And then if you're seed 13 and below, if you were to decline a team, you're basically asking to go home. So because I don't like, just in case anyone isn't aware, if you decline, you can't be picked by another person. So if you decline at 13 seed or below, it's mathematically impossible for you to be in a picking position. So be wary of getting blindsided. So basically, like if you're an alliance captain and you have your eyes set on a team, just be prepared for any situation that could happen. So if they were to decline you, then what do you do? And that's easily preventable by just making a pick list, so you can pick just the next team off. And then scorching the field. For anyone that's not familiar with this term, that basically means if you are a number 1 seeded team and let's say you got like a lucky match schedule, or like you've already talked to a lot of teams that said like, oh, we want to partner with this other team, and so like we'll decline you if you pick us. In that case, you definitely would want to scorch the field. So basically, like if let's say you are in number 1 seed and you have 3 like really competent, like super good robots like in 2nd, 3rd, and 4th seed, and they all said they were going to decline you or something, then you pick them anyway, so that they have to decline you, so they can't pick any of each other, and that would give you a strategic advantage during eliminations, because then you have alliances that are broken down and you basically prevented them from partnering up. So just know when this is to your advantage. It definitely is like a rare occurrence in FRC. And then just if you are on the other side and so you are being scorched, like if you are one of these top tier teams that might not want to pick the that might want to decline the number 1 seed, just be prepared about who the number 1 seed might also pick and then be declined by. And so you can obviously by having a pick list, you can prevent this too, and just pick the top robot on your list when you get to select. So
yeah, so I have a couple of stories that are related to this, and both of them from the 2013 season, which is kind of our emergent season in terms of that we stepped up our level of competition. The first competition was at Central Valley Regional, and we declined the number 3 seed to take on being the number 6 captain. And we did that because there was actually a full court shooter who was available to us as an offensive bot, and our robot was designed to work really well with a full court shooter. Well, it turned out that was a great decision on our part, and we ended up going on to win the regional, and that was what qualified us for championship. Which then we went to championship on the Curie field, a totally loaded field, one of the strongest fields at champs ever, and we came out of the blue. Nobody knew who we were, and we seeded number 1. Well, this is a case where we gamed out all the scenarios, and we knew that these top teams were going to decline us. One thing I want to tell you is if you think that teams are going to decline you when you're drafting, don't worry about being declined, okay? I've actually a couple of times I've worked, including my sister's team at Chesney Champs. They were worried about being embarrassed by being declined. Do not worry about your feelings, okay? Everybody, do not worry about your feelings if you're going to get declined. It's important because you can then strategically make it so that those other teams can't be drafted onto stronger alliances. You can break up other alliances. We did the most famous scorch ever at the 2013 Curie. We were declined by 4 teams, and we knew it was going to happen. And we have on video our captain starting to laugh as teams were declining on the 4th one. She's starting to giggle because she knows this is going exactly to plan. Everybody else in the stands is going, oh, and we're going, this is great. And so then we got the team that we wanted, which was 148, another full court shooter, and we went to Einstein with that for the first time with that alliance because we did not worry about being embarrassed about being declined. So please don't play nice when you're out there on the draft.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you, Richard. Yeah. Because you have on your slide, scorch the field when it's to your advantage. When is it ever not to your advantage?
I don't think it ever
It
is
isn't.
not.
I don't understand why this term comes up anymore. To be honest, you should always, when you're ready to pick, you pick the next best team in your division or in your regional competition. And then you pick the next best team after that and you keep going down. And like Richard says, never worry about being declined. Just keep going down the list and it's always to your advantage.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I wouldn't have that on your slide. It is always to your advantage.
Yeah, the other thing
I
is,
wouldn't call it scorching. I would just call it making smart decisions about your next pick.
and if you're on the flip side, you need to think about whether you should accept. So, for example, actually, the teams in the Curie division, if they have been thinking about what was going to happen when we started doing our draft, they should have accepted us and joined our alliance, because they should have known that they weren't going to get a strong alliance. And we've actually done that. We've actually when we've looked at a draft and said, oh, this team is actually going to be able to scorch the field, and we're not going to get a strong alliance, we say, well, we'll accept their bid for the alliance.
Mhm.
You would mention that you like that year you worked well with a specialized long shooter, and I'm not that familiar with that game.
Yeah.
Like, were there top teams that you would have just worked poorly with because your robots did the same subtasks?
Yes, actually, the team that was ranked second, which was my sister's team, 1983 Skunk Works, their robot did exactly the same thing that our robot
She
did.
accepted you. She could have just like stuck it to her.
Well, no, we did. Well, except for no, but we conferred with them, and we both agreed that we were going to scorch the field.
Oh, okay.
That we weren't going to pick each other. We weren't going to pick each other because we were talking.
Your sister like that?
Yeah, my sister. No, we were.
All your family in FRC.
It's easy then. Yeah, no.
It comes down to they were not the next best team on our list. The best team was either 2056 or
17, I think.
and that's who we ended up picking, right?
No, we picked
148.
148.
No, I mean that's who we ended up picking.
Oh, that's who.
first.
Scorching.
They
Scorching.
declined us, but we went with our list.
Right.
Okay, so that's the end of our presentation. We're opening it up to any questions you guys might have. So, yeah, are there any questions? Yeah.
Is it kind of like so each team has a captain to kind of ask the other captain whether they want to join the alliance or not?
Well, on our team, it's not the captain that does it. It's basically the strategist at a competition, or like the pit strategist or whatever, will then talk to. Usually, teams have like a scout lead that's kind of separate from the captain, and that's who does like the alliance like management and decisions and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you're a rookie team, so your team may not be big enough to have that many people, but you'll probably have your alliance captain out there on the field.
Yeah.
Draft goes. And we did that actually for quite a while, and then we realized that having the captain out there, the captain was too busy doing other things to have been following as closely as other students were.
Anyone? Yep.
To what extent should you scorch the field?
What extent? Well, to the fullest extent that you can, usually, right? Like we talked about the 2013 scorch, we scorched 4 robots. I mean, that's a little since that's like the biggest scorch. I would be surprised if I heard anything above like 3 or 4 robots scorched. But yeah, like to what extent? I guess it's just like any robot that you know will decline you should scorch
But
them.
you're not scorching by ranking. You're scorching by goodness.
Yeah.
Yes.
By
One that you
exactly.
picked.
Yeah,
Right.
I just want to go back to this. I don't like the term scorching. I mean, the fact is that you're in a position to pick because you've earned that position by being ranked high, and your list should be the list of the best possible robots you want to play with, from 2 to 60 if there's 60 teams in the competition. No one does that because you don't have to go down that far, but let's say 2 to 24. And if every team on that list starts declining you, first of all, once you get to about 8, the teams that are declining you aren't going to be playing in the competition anymore. So they're foolish to do that. But like people that are not going to be an alliance captain, they can't decline you. I mean, they can, but they're not going to play, right? You understand how that works. Because only someone picking can then continue.
Right.
Mhm.
You'll eventually get to a team that has to accept you, or else they won't be in the playoffs.
Yeah. So like to be clear, like you don't have to be in first seed to scorch the field. Essentially, what he's saying is scorching the field is really just going down your pick list, because like the top teams that you want to partner with, if they decline you, then it like even if you might not be playing with them, it's still to your advantage, because then they can't partner up with another strong robot.
Well, and I want to say there is a twist to that too. Sometimes you'll rank one team over another because you think you don't want to play against them. So there's certain teams that get together and are very good alliance captain managers who will manage an alliance above their playing ability, and you'll want to have that team higher on your list. And so we have a couple of teams that we're aware of that we're going to put them a little bit higher because we know that they have experience of getting more out of their alliance in the elimination rounds than other teams do. Mm-hmm. And so we'll give them a kind of a boost just because we don't want to play against them. We want to play with them on our alliance. And that becomes part of your consideration of how you're doing your draft ordering. You want to try to think about, in some cases you are actually thinking about how you're breaking up alliances in your draft list. But it's driven mostly by who you think is best.
Yep.
that you're looking for.
So in terms of the word scorch or not the scorch, if you're first and 2, 3, and 4 are going to make an alliance, and number 5 is your favorite one, then you might pick someone who's not on your list, scorch them so they don't get there.
Right. Yes.
I guess that kind of,
that's the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll do that in order to keep. I mean, 2, 3, and 4 can't get together, but 2
in that
and 3
case,
can get together.
you would just
and
have
you might pick 3. And in fact, that actually happened at the 2019 at the Carver Championship. Is that 364? I can't remember if they picked 4911.
They picked 4911.
They picked 4911, but they knew that both of us were going to decline, but they knew that they had to pick us in order to keep us from getting together. And so then they picked 330, who was their other first pick. And to be honest, 330 would have been our first pick if we had been the number 1 seed. But they weren't available when we came.
Oh, no, 364 went with 330, I think.
No. Oh, yeah, they did.
And 4911 with 118.
330 was in a place. So this is an example of 330. They were 6th seed, but they looked at the rankings and saw that if they declined 364, that they were not going to be able to build a good alliance. So they decided they had to go with 364. So that's an example of where you look at where you are, even though you might be an alliance captain, there might not be anything available that's good enough for you. So you may just have to decide to go with the seed above you.
Yeah.
So to what extent or like when would you trust scouting data versus like your own observations and like intuition? Because like last year at SPR, there was a team that was not even on our pick list for like the entire first day, who we ended up picking because we made the decision at the last minute because like we saw that we can't outscore the 4th seed of the so we're just gonna try to triple climb instead.
Triple climb? Oh,
last
year. Okay, yeah. I guess the question is still the same. That's honestly, it really depends on the competition. Usually, what we do is we use scouting data to make the initial like order, and then we use a combination of scouting data and subjective data like observations and anecdotes and stuff to then like do the pairwise rankings and sort through our list. So it's never like one or the other. It's definitely like everything's a factor into like the decision. So
yeah, but there are special circumstances. So in 2014, we actually our 4th pick robot. Because you have 4 picks at championships. Our 4th pick robot was actually a robot that year you could have a goalie stick for the auto routine. And there were only 2 robots in the competition in our division that had a goalie stick. And the one robot that had a goalie stick was our first pick. Well, we wanted to make sure that no one else had a goalie stick either. So we picked the other team that had a goalie stick as our 4th robot. They were a competent defense robot, so if we needed to put them on the field, they would have played reasonably well. But we wanted to take that possibility away from all of the other teams by being able to draft them. In 2015, our third or fourth pick, we picked them. Can't remember if we picked 50-12 third or fourth, but it doesn't matter because we picked at the same time. We picked them because we were able to put our can grabbers on that robot, and we knew that they were ready to take our can grabbers. And so we didn't have any scouting data to support that. We just knew that they were the robot that we wanted for that. And so it turned out that actually it was very strategic on our part to get that robot, because we were actually able in the semifinals to negotiate a deal against the other alliance that they would not put their can grabbers on the field if we didn't put our can grabbers on the field. Because it was going, if we both did it, it was going to be a total mess, and neither one of us were going to make the finals at Einstein. So we ended up both negotiating. We're going to pull back. It was pull back for mutually assured destruction, and then play out the matches. So those are two examples of where we made special circumstance drafts without, we didn't have any scouting data to support that. That was about looking at the special circumstances like you were doing.
Any other questions? I know you had a hand raised, but like, was your question answered in the back? All right. Okay. Well, this is my email if you guys have any questions that might pop up afterwards. Otherwise, thank you for coming and listening to our presentation.